We have been monitoring this Jack Smith testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. Quite the partisan back and forth that we have been witnessing.
It certainly is. A lot of the parts. I would say some of the moments that struck me, and even just recently too. There was a moment when Representative Niels of Texas turned around and addressed, there were 4 former Capitol police officers who are in the room there, and he addressed them, saying directly to them that they bore responsibility for the riot. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, if you've been watching with us, about what happened on January 6th, about who was responsible for what happened at the Capitol, but turned around and spoke to them directly and said this was not President Trump. You were responsible. That just stands out to me in all of this, right? As there is all this partisan grandstanding, that's a moment that it made me stop for a minute, Evan.
Right. I mean, the entire purpose of today's hearing by Republicans is to say that Donald Trump was not responsible for what happened on January 6th. He was not responsible for the riot, and Jack Smith was a partisan person. He was a partisan actor by the Justice Department to go after Donald Trump over what happened, and that he had freedom of speech, he had a First Amendment rights to believe that he had won the election, and he had every right to do everything he did, and that he did everything properly. And so that moment that you're focusing on is, I think Niels' way of responding to what Democrats have been really hammering, which is, this is the violence, this is what happened, we want to remind you what happened, you're not allowed to rewrite history. And that moment where he says, essentially, it's your leadership, that everyone knew that this was going to be a big crowd, it was going to be unruly, and you guys are the ones that failed to prepare for it.
There is an important moment, and we have to, we only have a moment here, but the timing, Jack Smith's timing, and you've talked a lot about this, Ellie, and this was something he was being pressed on, how quickly he wanted to try the president.
Yeah, first of all, that moment where the member of Congress addressed and blamed the police officers was an outrage, ridiculous, and an embarrassment. I think undermined the points they were trying to make. To your question, Brianna, the last congressman we saw brought up the fact that Jack Smith demanded a trial date 4 months out, 5 months out, in a case involving 13 million pages of documents. There is no defense lawyer in the country who can constitutionally prepare for trial and defend his client in that short a time frame. And the implication was you were rushing to get this in before the 2024 election. Jack Smith did not defend himself, by the way. He didn't say a word about that, which I found straight. Yeah, it's true, right?
It's true.
Exactly.
I mean,
and he didn't defend himself
before the election.
Exactly. Right. And Jack Smith has always maintained this veneer that he never thought about the election. Of course he did. Why would you demand such a quick trial date? But there's a contrast that some of the Democrats made, which is here you have Donald Trump explicitly calling for prosecutions of people. So some of Jack Smith's conduct gives rise, I think, to a fair conclusion that he was trying to rush it before the election. And Donald Trump is explicitly saying, go after this person, DOJ, go after that person who I don't like politically.
Yeah. We're going to pause on that because we also want to follow some breaking developments that are coming out of Minneapolis, where the vice president is speaking.
Have been encouraging illegal immigrants that one way they can evade arrest is by showing up at a legitimate place of business, making it impossible for these guys to actually enforce our immigration laws. So while I can understand the perspective of somebody who doesn't want to see an arrest happen at their place of work, I can also understand the perspective of our immigration enforcement officers who have to do their job and can't allow a heckler's veto over our immigration enforcement. And so much of what's gone wrong is the failure to do that. And here's the point. We can do a good job of enforcing our immigration laws without the chaos, but it actually requires the cooperation of state and local officials. If you look at blue